what's going on, guys? Jake Verdon Tech here, back with another video, and today is the day where we finally finish up the Lian Li O11 Mini water-cooled build that I've been working on for quite a while, but this is the build log that kind of finishes this build off. So in this video, it's going to kind of cover a wide range, I would say, as far as talking about this build. And as far as the build log goes, I really didn't film a whole lot of these steps to really finish this build up, just because, yeah, one of those things, you know, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking when you start filling your PC with water. We did try and get that part, but there was just a lot of odd and end things that I really had to finish up, like the wiring, which isn't super exciting, and stuff like that. So I think for the most part in this video, we're just going to talk about the finished product of this build. We're going to talk about the components and kind of how it all came together and has turned out to be just such a beautiful build, in my opinion. And with talking about the components, the pros and cons of what we chose and how we kind of put it all together, and then just kind of the pros and cons too of the build overall. So where to start with a build like this? I guess we can just kind of start off with my overall idea. And it was really just getting a high performance system that's fully water cooled in a more compact case. And I know that this isn't an ITX build or anything of that nature where it's, you know, super compact, but this is the Lian Li O11 Mini is a very small, what I would call probably a micro ATX case. It's a small footprint, but just has so much space optimization, and there's really a lot you can do with this case. And I think that's where a lot of people give the O11 Mini a lot of unnecessary flack because they call it a mini, but I think in Lian Li's defense, it's not really, they didn't try and make this a mini ITX case. It's just a smaller version of their very popular O11 Dynamic, where some people do put an ITX motherboard in here to really max out on cooling and the radiator compatibility. But I think the sweet spot is probably going to be micro ATX or ATX size motherboard, which really gives you the features of having a full size build. And even going with a ATX motherboard, we still were able to fit a 360 slim radiator and a 240 slim radiator, and they fit quite nicely. And I actually love the orientation of them, where you have the 360 on the bottom and then the 240 off to the right side of the build sitting vertical. This configuration I'm actually really happy with for a number of reasons. One being, I just kind of like not having a radiator sitting above your core components, like usually mounting a 360 or something above your motherboard and graphics card. It's kind of nice not having anything up above it, for the obvious reasons if you do encounter a leak or something of that nature, or you need to get to the upper components of your motherboard. It's really nice not having anything up above it as far as radiators go. Overall, this is the first time I've built in a Lian Li case and the Lian Li O11 Dynamic Mini, but I completely get it now why you see so many of these cases on social media and just so many people building in the Lian Li O11 Dynamic lineup, whether it's the Evo, the Standard, the Mini. This case really does check every box. I mean, it does have a beautiful aesthetic, a look that a lot of people desire with the tempered glass. I think the biggest thing for me, though, is just the space optimization, and as far as the radiator compatibility, the motherboard compatibility. Even in the Mini, you have a lot of different options to work with. And then the third thing is just, it's so easy to work in, you know, and that kind of ties into being very space optimized. But, you know, if you are doing a water-cooled build and you're kind of mocking things up, I mean, there was a number of times where I had the parts in and out of this system. It really didn't take much time or was a major chore, just because this case is just very easy to work in. And transitioning into the loop. The loop, this is one thing you just really got to take your time with and plan out. And I think we did a good job of that. I definitely took my time. And we really got some unique bends that I'm very happy with. And as I talked about in the last build vlog, we tried to do mostly like just 90 degrees. Some of the bends are like a multi-axis bend, which can be very tricky just because you don't have the freedom to just trim down the end to fit. You basically have to bend it the right amount and just hope that it fits on both ends. We used the Corsair Hydro X frosted tubing, and I love the finish. I actually love the tubing itself as well. It was easy to work with. If you do try using this tubing, I don't know if it's a little bit more along the lines of acrylic, but if you do use anything like the Thermaltake tube cutting tool, You can, if you're not careful. You just need to really take your time and score it really well and just slowly tighten down on it, or you might get some cracking with it. Other than that though, I absolutely love the Corsair Hydro X frosted tubing, and I do love the 14 mil. I think it's a little bit more clean and streamlined versus like a 16 mil OD tubing. For the other water cooling parts, for the water blocks, we went with Corsair Hydro X. I really like the looks of them. I think they have a beautiful aesthetic, and they're pretty easy to work with as far as installing the blocks. Even for the GPU, wasn't too bad of an install. And the fact that the GPU was mostly a shroud that was removable, we were able to paint it white to match this build, which made it absolutely perfect. Another water cooling component we can't not mention is the FLT240 from EK. I've mentioned it before. I love this pump and reservoir combo. I like that it's not just a standard tube reservoir, like kind of how most water cooled builds looked, you know, the past few years or so. It changes it up and kind of looks more like a distro plate, but it's just more of a pump and res combo. But it fits in this case perfectly and does the job, and aesthetically looks very pleasing as well. The other more peripheral components I want to highlight is definitely want to talk about the fans. We use the SL120s from Lian Li, and I gotta say, I love these fans as far as looks goes, performance. They're kind of the total package, and these aren't the latest and greatest from Lian Li. These ones were kind of the first fans they came out with when it comes to the daisy chain technology they have. They now do have the models, the SL Infinity, I believe, and the ALs, which are also very good options as well, and kind of utilize the same daisy chain technology where you can essentially have, I think, up to 4 Lian Li fans chained together. And the way these work is each fan has contacts on the sides of them, and you can clip them together and they generate the electricity and connectivity through them. So instead of having cables running off of each fan, you just have them off the one on the end, which if you guys are very meticulous on cable management and maybe you've worked with other fans that have, you know, 2 or 3 wires running off of each fan, it gets to be extremely tough to cable manage. And I experienced this with the Corsair light loop fans and having to have the Commander Pros and the Lighting Node Pros. It is just an absolute mess. And then going to something like the Lian Li fans where they're all daisy chained, and for 6 fans, I only have 4 wires in total running off of them. And it's just so much better to cable manage, and you really just don't have much cables at all when it comes to the daisy chains. The software for these fans can be a little bit tricky, but Lian Li does a really good job on their website and telling you which software you should have. It's mostly based on the controller that you get when you purchase the fans. There are a couple different controllers out there, and some work with the LConnect 1 software, and then others work with the LConnect 2 software. I got the controller that says SL on it, and they are rated for the LConnect 2 software. So that's what we've been using, and I gotta say I love LConnect from Lian Li. It's very intuitive to use, has quite a few features, and it gives you a very wide range of control when it comes to the RGB, the fan control, simply packed in a nice small application and isn't too overwhelming. One thing to mention, I also do have 2 of the Noctua, the NF-A12x25s, I believe they are. I also have those hooked into the Lian Li controller, and they do work. I've had some issues where when I first start the PC, they tend to want to ramp up and down. I don't know if it's just a compatibility issue with the controller. Sometimes it sorts itself out, and then other times I've noticed a fix for it is just switching it, toggling it from PWM to manual or whatever setting you want to go to. That seems to fix it as well, but not exactly sure what that's all about, but it only happens with the Noctua fans in the Lian Li controller. There's definitely tons of different RGB settings you can do for the Lian Li SL fans or the AL, or really any of Lian Li's new fan models that are RGB. The one thing I do wish it had is maybe some sort of manual fan curve mode where you could adjust the fan curve, you know, based on temperatures, kind of how you can in the BIOS when setting like a PWM fan curve. I wish that was in the LConnect software, but maybe it will be in the future. And while kind of being on the subject of RGB, I do want to talk about like which software I'm using for which components, as I'm sure a lot of people are curious. And, you know, Most of us that build custom PCs like this that have RGB end up with a plethora of RGB software, and this PC is no exception. Which it's really not too bad. For this PC, we're using the L-Connect software for the fan RGB, and for the other components that we have RGB, which would be the water blocks on the CPU and GPU, and then for the pump and reservoir combo, this is where it gets a little interesting. So I'm actually using Armory Crate to run the Corsair Hydro X water blocks and the EK pump and reservoir combo. I've actually had pretty good luck with Armory Crate in the past, and that uses ASUS Aura for the RGB portion of it. And we're essentially just splitting off of one RGB header to these components, and it seems to work quite well. I do absolutely love the fact that Corsair includes different types of adapters just for standard RGB, so you can plug their components into a standard RGB header on your motherboard instead of having to have Corsair's Lighting Node Pro or Commander Pro or something for RGB on Corsair's side. I am still using IQ for one of the components, which is the RAM. We are using Corsair's Dominator Platinum. And in this case, IQ really is the only way to go if you're running Corsair RAM, and it'll give you the most color options and adjustment features for your RAM. All in all, for having 3 different pieces of RGB software, it really doesn't feel too clunky to me or conflicting between the software itself. Overall, it does give us really in-depth customizations we can do with the RGB. And I know not everybody's a fan of RGB, and I was usually pretty minimal on it myself. But just having the flexibility and the ability to customize everything with a few clicks is actually really nice. Alrighty, so talking about the core components, I really wanted to go more CPU heavy on this build just because of the amount of video and photo editing I do. So I decided to go with the AMD Ryzen 5900X, and I think it was a great pick, having 12 cores, 24 threads, great clock speeds. It really is an all-around great chip for editing, any types of rendering. It's even a really good gaming chip, having pretty high clock speed. And even though we are about to see the next generation of Ryzen come out with the really insane specs that we're seeing, the 5900X in my opinion is still a fantastic buy. It's just so much processor for the money, and I think you can pick this CPU up now for probably the $350 to $380 mark. And with this CPU, everything's been extremely snappy. Renders are very quick in Adobe Premiere Pro. And while gaming, it's been a really good chip so far. The only complaint I have about the 5900X, and I think that's for a lot of the getting towards the upper end mainstream Ryzen CPUs, it is a lot of cores and a lot of threads to manage, and it can get a little hot at times. So I don't have a whole lot of data since I've been working with this CPU quite a bit, but I have run some slight undervolts on it, and I am seeing a lot better performance as far as the temperatures go. Doing some research, it actually is really optimal to do a slight undervolt on the 5900X. From results I've seen from others too, they are getting increased performance pretty consistently and consistently lower temperatures. Usually my idle package temp for the 5900X in this system and this loop configuration, we're seeing around 45C, and when playing games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, running tests in Cinebench, with the undervolt I've seen temperatures around 65 to 68C, which I'm perfectly comfortable with. Before the undervolt, we were seeing kind of over the 70 mark, which I definitely am not a fan of, especially being in a water-cooled build. But this chip is far different from my i7-8700K, which I was running in my last build. Alright guys, talking about the bread and butter, the GPU. This is the RTX 3080, and the model it happens to be is the MSI Ventus 3080, and it is the LHR model. So I really didn't have a specific graphics card I was shopping for this build, just as far as like the model goes and what kind of stock cooler it comes with. It was more so just like what kind of card I can get for a decent price that I can put a water block on. And I gotta say, even just for the 3080, it is an absolute beast. It is quite the noticeable upgrade from my 1080 Ti, which I still really love. I still think that's a great card even today. But going to a 3080 is definitely quite the upgrade. One thing I noticed about the 3080, I don't know if it's game optimization or just how much little stress is put on the card, but there's a lot of titles where the 3080 really isn't getting much utilization. Games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, I noticed the card would just kind of hang out around the 20 to 25% load. This is something more based on titles and whatever you're trying to run. But other games like Flight Simulator, which I kind of consider to be probably the most graphically intense program you can try and run lately, that's not really a benchmark, that's more towards a game. And in this configuration, the 3080 did absolutely fantastic. We were able to get it to 100% load on that title. And as far as temps goes, it really didn't exceed 50 degrees C. The card really shined on Flight Simulator. We ran all our settings on Ultra on the 1440p ultra wide panel, and we were getting between the 60 to 100 FPS mark. And I think VSync might have been locked on. I did change it as soon as I went into Flight Simulator, but I changed a bunch of settings, and it did say must reboot the game to have some of these settings take effect. So we still could have seen some stuff from VSync, as I did see the FPS counter just kind of hanging out around 60 most of the time. But definitely no complaints on the 3080, especially when it comes to performance and temperatures. Talking about ray tracing and the RTX features in titles, I haven't messed with this much at all in the past, obviously just because I didn't have a card that could really do it. I did at one point have a RTX 2060, and I did mess with it on Minecraft just to see what it was like, and of course that card struggled pretty hard. We're seeing a night and day performance when it comes to real-time ray tracing, and I was able to test this in Minecraft on some of the initial RTX servers that kind of demonstrate the ray tracing in Minecraft, which looks really good. So that is going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you for checking this one out. I really just wanted to give a kind of final build log. I know there wasn't much steps to finishing this build. We more so just talked about the build and how it turned out, but I love the way it turned out. And I think this has to be one of the prettiest O11 mini builds I've seen, not to be too biased. And I couldn't be happier of how it turned out aesthetically, also from a performance standpoint. I've been running this system for about a week and everything's been good on it. We might be doing some follow-up videos with the 5900X. I'm really still trying to find that sweet spot where the tuning's right as far as performance and temperature goes. So we might do an updated video on that and kind of a tutorial style video on undervolting the 5900X and getting the best cooling and performance. Thank you guys for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to drop a like on it. And if you want to see more tech related videos like this one, be sure to subscribe. As always, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.